Hey film fans, this is Craig here for Craig's Film Reviews. In this episode we're going to be talking about Stephen King's It. The new horror movie came out a few weeks ago. It's been a big hit. So let's get to it. It is a remake of, well, it's a remake of the TV movie that was made in the 90s. It had a lot of impression on lot of young viewers that saw it, of a certain generation. Tim Curry played the clown Pennywise, a very scary monster that's kind of become iconic in the horror genre. This remake is more of an adaptation of the original Stephen King novel from 1986, considered one of King's greatest novels, probably his masterpiece. But it's a big, hefty, chunky one. It's 1,000 pages long. It's phone book size. Anyone who tried to take that film on and do an actual complete adaptation of that book would be setting themselves a Herculean task. It would be 5 hours long. It's got a very ambitious structure, lots of very dark themes that would probably be unfilmable, really, about child abuse, sex abuse, lots of grim violence towards children, very weird interdimensional stuff going on there, but we'll get into that in a moment as well. So this version of it was directed by Andy Muschietti, who also directed Mama with Jessica Chastain that came out a few years ago. A decent enough film, quite interesting. A bit of an upgrade with this one. I think this is a better film. Possibly because the story is so strong. King's book is great. It's got a really strong emotional storyline underneath all the horror. And like all the best horror films, it deals with real fears, not just monsters in the night. It deals with the real horrors that people can experience in real life. So again, we're going about child abuse and bullying, and basically anything that children can be subjected to, and the horrors, the traumas of childhood that live on for the rest of our lives, and these fears that we hold on forever. So very dark, powerful themes. The story, set in Derry, in a small American town in the 80s. The story's been updated from the novel. So in the novel, the children's story is set in the 50s, and the main storyline of the adults is set in the 1980s. So Muschietti and his writers have made the wise decision to abandon the original novel structure that contained a kind of back and forth between the present and the past, again to try and get this theme of the horrors of the past inflicted on the present. So they've abandoned that because I think that would be a very ambitious film, very interesting film, but I just think it would be too complicated to do. So what they've obviously decided to do is to just split it into two parts. The first part is the one that's been released now, set in the 80s. They've updated it to the 80s. Possibly one because it makes sense, because now the new version will be set 30 years later. The second version will be set 30 years later in this kind of time, 2017. So it follows in that way. But also it rides on a lot of wave of 80s nostalgia. It gives... it definitely does feel like it's influenced by things like Stranger Things and Super 8 and all these other films that are trying to regenerate that feel of the Amblin entertainment, like Steven Spielberg type movies like The Goonies and Gremlins, and it's trying to Stand By Me, Stephen King's book film Stand By Me. It's definitely got that feel to it of these young children in the 80s riding around on bikes, getting into adventures with some quite scary moments as well. So the story set in Derry in 1980s, 89 I think. It starts off with a young lad called Georgie. He's playing with a little boat that his brother made him in the rain, and as the boat falls into a storm drain, he meets Pennywise, a scary clown in there who rips his arms off and then sucks him in. George is considered missing and presumed dead. His brother Bill is traumatised by this, obviously, and when he and his friends, a group of other bully children called the Losers Club, they call themselves ironically, and they band together and start to find out that that's not the only disappearance of children in the area. Lots of strange goings on in the town, and they realise that Pennywise is real, and he's a interdimensional monster that can appear as your worst nightmares. And he arrives into towns every 30 years, to wreak havoc, as they find out when they investigate some of the history of the town. So, overall, did I like it? Yeah, it's a very good film. It's quite well made, very slick, nice visuals. Muschietti and his cinematographers really capture that kind of dreamy, like I said, 1980s style of a childhood that doesn't really exist anymore, of kids playing out in the woods, playing around and riding around on bikes, not indoors on their iPads anymore. And it really captures that feel. Very good direction of the actors. I need to mention a few of the actors that stood out for me. Jaden Labour, Bill, he's the main character. He carries a lot of the emotional weight of the film and does it very well. Finn Wolfhard plays Richie, who's the wisecracker of the group, and he's got a lot of funny lines, a lot of swearing for a young kid, but it's quite funny. He's from Stranger Things as well. Sophie Lillis, she plays Beverly, who's kind of one of the most tragic figures in the story. She's the only girl in the group who's abused by her father sexually. It's very strongly hinted at, and is kind of a bit old before her time. So she's got quite a very tragic story, and Sophie Lillis plays her brilliantly. She reminds me very much of Amy Adams, a young Amy Adams. So maybe there's a long career for her there as well. It's a very funny film. The interplay between the kids is very funny. Lots of funny jokes in those ones, and it's just quite an entertaining story. It's quite a gripping story, exciting story. These kids battling this interdimensional monster. Bill Skarsgård plays Pennywise, or It, as the Pennywise the clown character that he frequently appears in. Is he as good as Tim Curry? He's different. He's a different interpretation of the thing, which is good. He didn't just try and copy Tim Curry, which is such a iconic horror villain now. He's a bit more like the Joker. He's a bit more deranged in this one. He's quite good. Yeah, all I want to say about that one. He's quite an impressive character in it. Some of the problems, it was the thing for me is I didn't find it very scary. It felt like it was a Goonies film, like a children's film, that had quite a lot of gore and violence in for a kids' film, and the swearing and some of the sexual themes were obviously make it more adult and a bit more unpleasant and disturbing. But I didn't find it scary. It's one of those from other Muschietti's other films. It is a kind of in that genre of what I'd like to call boo. They're boo films. They're like someone walks into a room, the music goes quiet, a monster jumps out, boo, or a cat jumps, boo, and it's like that. And they're fine, but they don't. Once you learn the tricks, and you can kind of see it, because Muschietti kind of signals every scare by going to weird Dutch angles, and you can kind of tell when the scares are coming. And I didn't find it that particularly scary. I mean, some people might find it more scary. I'm not particularly scared of clowns. I know a lot of people, mainly due to the original TV movie, have got some sort of phobia of clowns that don't find them particularly creepy or scary. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But, so I didn't find it particularly scary. I walked out the cinema. I didn't have any nightmares about the film. But the most unsettling moments were the more subtle horrors of, again, the abusive parents themes, and the abuses towards the children was quite unpleasant. Again, Richie's character, his mother is some sort of, she's Munchausen syndrome really on him, that she tells him that he's got all these horrible diseases, and you can see that kind of psychological abuse as well as the overt kind of sexual abuse that Beverly's father abuses her. There's a lot of those unsettling themes underneath, which I think raises the film above your standard horror film. Again, a lot of that is King, I think. I think it just comes from King's novel, and he's a brilliant writer who understands that greatest horror comes from real horror. It's not monsters under your bed. It's that real horror that happens to people in real life. Some of the things changes from the novel, I don't know. I would love to see the novel put on screen. It's never going to happen. There's a lot of very unpleasant stuff in there. There's hints of like male rape, and at the end of the original book, there's a bizarre orgy scene between the kids, which is you'd never be able to put that on film. I don't think. It's too extreme, and it doesn't make a lot of sense in the novel. I would like to see the structure. I can understand why they've done it. They've split it into more manageable chunks, but I always thought that structure might be quite interesting, to go back, start with them adults and flash back to the traumas that happen to them and how it infects their lives. But we'll see that in the next film, hopefully. And also the other thing is, the focus on Pennywise the clown. Okay, he's the iconic villain, and when people go to see it, they want to see when they think of it, they think of the clown. But in the novel, he appears in a variety of different guises: spiders, the mummy, werewolves. These kind of common vampires. These kind of common horror images that children are frightened of, and it's meant to be he appears as their worst themes. I would have thought that might have given a bit of a different feel. There's one scene where Richie encounters a diseased man. Again, that's to do with his fears of disease. So it could have been. I think maybe that could have been made more of. And okay, you can't do the mummy and the werewolf now because that's not really considered horror iconography anymore. But they maybe could have put more modern themes in, more modern fears. I don't know what they could have done, but it may have been more interesting that way. A bit disappointed there's no space turtles. I mean, every film could do with more space turtles, but because in the novel there's a lot of stuff about interdimensional. It comes from this other parallel dimension that created the universe, and there's an evil version which is the clown it, and the monster it. Sorry, and this space turtle. I think it would be too bizarre to introduce this one. Muschietti said he will get into that in the next film, so I'm looking forward to that. But overall it was a good film. It was a good adaptation of King. There's not many Stephen King's adaptations because a lot of filmmakers miss the point that the real horrors are to do with the characters and their fears and the psychological horror of life. So yeah, I think Muschietti understands that, and it's a very as faithful as it could be. There's some kind of they've smoothed out some of the weirder parts of it, made it a more conventional film, especially the ending is more conventional. Beverly gets captured by it and they have to go into its lair. So it's a little bit more of a rescue thing, and it's a bit more conventional than as it is in the novel. But yeah, it's a very entertaining kind of adventure almost with a horror over the top of it. Kids are good. Kids are very lovable, likeable actors. Very funny, you care about them, you follow their story. It's quite well made, and some bits are quite exciting. The scene when they go into what I believe is the home of it, it's quite tense and quite exciting. Well made. I'm looking forward to the next one. Hopefully they can reintroduce some of the stuff they cut out of this one and it might be a bit more kind of ambitious, especially now that this film's been such a massive critical and commercial hit. People seem to love it. It's been a huge box office hit. Unusual. Well, horror films are usually quite big hits, but this one's been a huge hit. I think more so than people thought. And so hopefully they'll take a few more risks with the next one. But overall, yeah, it was a very good film. I highly recommend it, especially if you're a horror fan. Even if you're not, I don't think it's... Well, maybe I'm a bit too tough, but I've seen some hardcore horror films, and this one wasn't one of them. But it was good. It's a perfect night out if you like a scary movie out. Perfect Halloween. I'm sure they'll leave it out in the cinemas until Halloween, but I would recommend it. So overall, yeah, I thought it was quite good. Okay, everyone, thanks for listening to and watching my Craig's film reviews, and this one's been about It. If you have any comments and any views on what you think about it, do you think it went too far away from the novel? Did you like the film? Are you looking forward to the next part? Put a few comments below. Again, hit the like button if you liked it. Hit subscribe if you want to see more reviews. So thanks very much, everyone.